They tied the Apache girl to a pole for daring to love a white man. But Elias Whitaker made sure she didn't suffer through it alone. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Out in Broken Mesa, the sun didn't forgive, not even a little. It was late in the summer season, and the heat bore down so heavy it made the crooked old buildings groan. Main Street was a warped trail of dry dirt and fading dust. It lay still beneath the blazing sky. The only things moving were a couple of flies and the soft groan of a pole someone had planted at dawn, weathered tall and jagged. By midday, a quiet crowd had gathered. Maybe 20 folks, no more. That was all it took. They stood without speaking, arms crossed, lips tight, boots grinding dry earth. Just staring. They'd dragged her out just before noon. Her name was Rhea Blackbird. Not that anyone called her that now. She was young skin like copper eyes, dark as the bottom of a well. Her black hair hung half-braided down her back. Could have been 23, maybe younger. Her dress was torn at one shoulder, the seams dark with dirt and dried blood. The neckline had been ripped too far, the tear exposing the soft curve of her chest. Her arms were bound behind her elbows, yanked close. Her bare feet were cut and raw from stone heels, cracked soles crusted with blood. She didn't beg, didn't cry. Just stood there, lashed to that damn pole, blinking slow through lashes caked with dust. Her lip was split, one eye swollen, bruised, purple, but her gaze passed over the crowd like they weren't even there. Most folks couldn't meet her eyes. They just kept gawking at her body, at the way her dress clung where it shouldn't, whispering behind their palms like she couldn't hear. She was with a white fella, someone near the back muttered. Didn't even try to keep it quiet. Shameless, spat a man. Now she's got her shame right where folks can see it. Serves her right. The man she'd loved, Wade Fletcher, had skipped town 3 days ago. Slipped out without a trace. No one asked where he'd gone. They saved their fury for her, the girl who stayed behind. They tied her there to send a message. No trial. No say. Just rope and silence. Elias Whitaker had spent his morning out on the edge of his land, fixing the corner of a sagging fence. He didn't call it a ranch anymore. Long ago, he ran cattle and horses across that land. Folks knew his name. But the war had taken all that. He'd ridden with the Union cavalry, seen things no man should, killed when he didn't want to, buried friends and strangers alike. He came home different. Now 41, tall and gaunt-eyed, the fire in him banked low. His hands were broad and hard as shovel blades. A limp in his right leg dragged slightly when he walked. His duster was stiff with months of dust and trail grit. He never cleaned his revolver unless he had to, but it was always ready. Folks kept clear of him. He didn't mind. Didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't talk much. Lived 2 miles out of Broken Mesa, came in only when he ran low on flour or nails. That day was one of those days. As he stepped down from his horse in front of the general store, he felt the silence before he saw the reason. The way folks had turned toward the square. No one said a word. He moved slow like always, boots scuffing dirt coat brushing behind him. His face was dark from sun, and wind eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his battered hat. He passed the smithy, then the saloon. Then he saw her. At first, she was just a shape in the sun, tied upright, unmoving. But then his eyes adjusted to the bruises, the ragged dress, the way her head dipped like she hadn't slept in days. She was breathing barely. Her wrists had gone purple under the ropes. Her chest rose in slow, shallow pulls. Blood had dried on her thigh. Her neckline drooped so low it exposed more than anyone should have seen. Nobody had bothered to fix it. Nobody cared. Elias stood still, his jaw clamped. Then he stepped forward. Heads turned. Murmurs stirred. One man, a tall deputy, stepped into his path, trying hard to look in control. "Afternoon, Whitaker," the deputy said, Tom Creed, his badge catching the sun. His tone was half challenge, half unease. "Town's handling business." "Doesn't look like justice to me," Elias said, locking eyes with him. Creed shrugged. "She broke the rules." "What rules?" Elias asked, low and hard. "She's Apache. She laid with a white man." Creed's lip curled. "That's filth." Elias's eyes slid past him to Rhea. "Where's the man gone?" Creed answered flat. "Left town. She's the one that stayed. That's her mistake." Elias exhaled slow through his nose. His fists curled, then relaxed. "And you plan to leave her out here till she drops from the heat?" "She's an example," Creed muttered. Elias took a step, then another. Whitaker Creed warned, but Elias didn't stop. He walked right up to the girl. Rhea didn't flinch, didn't shift. Her eyes didn't even flicker. Elias Whitaker reached for the knife on his belt. Not in a hurry, and not to threaten. He worked the blade under the rope at her wrists, slow and steady. The tension in the square grew sharp. A few gasps cut through the heat. "You cut her loose. You answer to the town," Tom Creed warned from behind. Elias didn't respond. He kept slicing, deliberate and calm. The rope gave way. Rhea Blackbird sagged slightly, her arms too numb to hold her weight. Before she collapsed, Elias caught her one strong hand beneath her elbow. She tensed, but didn't pull back. "You want her," someone shouted from the crowd. "Then take her. She ain't ours no more." Elias scanned their faces. He didn't offer a word, just turned. He helped her walk. She didn't resist. She didn't say thanks. She simply followed. Her steps were unsteady legs, dragging through the dust. He didn't rush her. Didn't speak. Together they passed the edge of town and kept going. Not once did either of them look back. His land sat quiet, sun-seared hollow. The barn slouched to one side. Fences had given up the fight. The only shelter beyond the cabin was the old cattle shed, bare walls, dirt floor, and a single cracked window. He opened the door and looked inside. Nothing but dust and shadow. Still better than a pole in the sun. "You can stay," he said, voice low. She gave no reply. Just stepped in, lowered herself onto the floor like her body didn't trust movement. He walked away. That night he returned and left a folded blanket at the door, then a tin cup of water, a chunk of dry bread. She didn't speak, didn't look his way. He didn't linger. Inside his cabin, Elias sat by the fading fire boots, off rubbing the scar along his thigh. Something in his chest felt heavy. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. But something inside him churned. The war had carved out the worst in men. He thought nothing could rattle him anymore. But seeing her bound, beaten, left to roast like an animal stirred something that hadn't moved in years. The wind howled outside. The cattle shed groaned in reply. Inside, Rhea sat against the far wall, knees pulled close, the untouched bread in her lap. Her fingers twitched faintly from the heat and pain, but her jaw stayed tight. Her eyes locked on nothing. She hadn't run, and Elias noticed. That night he didn't sleep much. He lay there, listening to the wind and wondering about the girl huddled in that shed. He didn't know what came next, but he knew this much: no one from that damn town was laying hands on her again. Not on his land. Not while he drew breath. Dawn crept in, slow. A pale gray settled over Broken Mesa long before the sun breached the ridge. Elias stood in the doorway, tin of coffee in hand, watching the shed across the dusty yard. She hadn't come out. He didn't expect her to, not after what they'd done. She had every reason to mistrust a man, especially one like him. But she hadn't left. And that meant something, though he didn't know what yet. His back ached from another night sleeping on the floor. The bed had gone unused since the war. Habit more than comfort. The fire had burned itself out hours ago. His coat still hung on the chair by the door, the hem crusted with dust. He stepped off the porch with a quiet grunt and headed for the shed. He didn't knock. He eased the door open and waited. She sat curled in the corner, wrapped in the blanket he'd left. Her hair fell forward, hiding half her face. Bare legs drawn close, silent and still. The bread was gone. The cup was empty. The swelling on her face had worsened. Her lip had cracked deeper. She looked up at him without emotion. Flat, unreadable. "You need water?" he asked. She didn't answer. He waited a moment longer, then set a small tin basin of clean water on the floor. A folded rag. A spoon. A slice of salted pork. Then he stepped back and closed the door. He wasn't a man of many words. Never had been. And he knew pushing her would do more harm than good. Still, a dull worry was beginning to fester. Not for her safety. Not anymore. But for what the hell they were supposed to do now. She had nowhere to go. And he wasn't about to drive her back to town. By midday, the door creaked open. Elias was at the front fence, sleeves rolled up, sweat trailing down his neck. He looked up slow and careful. She walked barefoot across the hard ground. Careful. Wrapped in the same blanket. Her dress still clung to her like a forgotten thing. Torn near the hip neckline, drooping, revealing more than she likely knew or cared. She didn't flinch. Didn't seem to notice. Elias turned back to the rail hammer in hand, pretending he hadn't seen her. She stopped about 10 feet away, stood there a while, then finally asked, voice quiet, "Why?" He turned his head. "Why? What? Why'd you come for me?" He didn't answer right away. Just set the hammer down, wiped his hands on his pants. "You were gonna die," he said. "I didn't ask for your help." "I know." She studied him, arms pulled tight under the blanket. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "They didn't care." He nodded slowly. They never do. That was their first real conversation. He didn't push it further, just nodded toward the rain barrel. "There's clean water. Use what you need." She moved slow, limping slightly. At the barrel, she dipped the tin cup and drank in quiet sips. Her eyes flicked toward him once. He didn't move. That evening, she sat outside by the fire pit. Elias brought out a stool and handed her a plate, half beans, half pork. She took it gently, eyes still avoiding his. She ate slow. Didn't ask for more. When she was done, she set the plate down and stood. "You got a name?" he asked. She paused. "Rhea." He nodded once. "Elias." She didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, "I know," and turned back toward the shed. That night, Elias sat on the porch, coffee tin, cold in his hand, trying to piece her together. He hadn't seen her before that day in town. Didn't know where she came from. Didn't know who the man was that left her there. Wade Fletcher, maybe. Didn't know why she stayed. Maybe she had nowhere else. Maybe she'd already given up. He looked toward the shed moonlight silvering the roof. Part of him figured she'd be gone come morning, but another part, the one that still believed in something, hoped she'd still be there. And come sunrise, she was. He left a plate by her door, bread and eggs. This time when she opened it, she looked him dead in the eye. "You want me gone?" she asked. "No. You don't even know me. I don't need to." "You don't need to," she said, glancing at the plate, then up at him. "I'm not here to beg, and I don't warm beds just to stay out of the cold. I didn't ask for that. I just want to work, earn my keep." Elias Whitaker rubbed his jaw, eyes narrowed. "Ain't much left around here but busted fence and dry dirt. I can dig. Wash and mend a man's clothes." He paused, thinking, then gave a quiet nod. "All right." He pointed toward a leaning, half-collapsed chicken pen. "Needs clearing. Watch for snakes." She nodded and limped toward it without another word. And just like that, she stayed. The day passed without another conversation. But Elias noticed the way she moved. No complaint, no hesitation. She ripped up brush with bare hands, pulled weeds from dry roots, hauled splintered wood like it weighed nothing. She didn't ask for breaks. Didn't sit unless the task was done. By sundown, her dress clung to her skin, sweat and dirt molding the fabric tight around her hips and chest. She didn't seem to care how much it revealed, or maybe she just didn't have the strength to care. But Elias noticed, and it stirred something in him, not desire, but discomfort. The way seeing someone too real can shake a man. Someone broken still standing. That night when she returned to the shed, he walked to her door carrying a small bucket of warm water and a folded cloth. He knocked once, soft. She opened it, eyes rimmed with fatigue but steady. He held the bucket out. "For your bruises," he said. She looked at it, then at him, and slowly took it. "Thank you." The first words of gratitude she'd spoken. That was enough. Elias turned and walked back to the cabin, heart heavy in a way he hadn't felt in years. He hadn't planned to keep her around, hadn't planned to feel anything at all. But here he was. And deep down he knew the folks from town weren't done. They wouldn't let this lie. She was on his land now. That made her his burden. Only it didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a decision. The days that followed fell into a rhythm neither spoke aloud. Rhea Blackbird rose before the sun. She stuck close to the fence line, working in silence, always alert. Elias noticed her movements, the way she walked softly, the way her shoulders were never quite relaxed. Like she was used to staying invisible. Like she was waiting for someone to call her out to drag her back. But she didn't flinch around him anymore. Not like that first day. She still slept in his cattle shed. She never asked for the cabin. He never offered. There was no need. What existed between them wasn't built on kindness spoken aloud, but on unspoken things, the meals left quietly near her door, the tools she cleaned and arranged each night, the blanket folded with precision. She worked without instruction, without complaint. Sometimes when the work demanded more than two hands, Elias joined her. He watched the way she moved, strong shoulders, steady grip. That same torn dress began to fray more each day. The neckline drooped lower. The sides clung tighter. He never said a word about it, but it was hard not to notice the way it hugged her chest when she bent over the water barrel or lifted split wood. Her legs, sun-darkened and bruised, carried her without pause. He caught himself watching too long. Then he looked away, jaw clenched with guilt. She never mentioned it. Maybe she didn't notice. Or maybe she'd learned to pretend she didn't. On the fourth morning, she sat near the porch, sewing a patch into one of his shirts. Her fingers moved quick, her lips cracked, but calm. "Why don't you go into town anymore?" she asked. Elias didn't lift his eyes from the post he was fixing. "Don't like the company." "They don't like you either," she replied. "Not cruel, just true." He glanced over. She kept sewing eyes on the needle. "No, they don't," he said, "and that's mutual." She nodded. "You used to be somebody there." His silence answered her. "Not anymore," he finally muttered. She didn't ask more, just kept stitching, but the question stayed between them like smoke. That evening she came to the porch and sat beside him, no invitation asked, just brought her blanket and settled on the top step legs tucked beneath her. The breeze stirred her hair long and loose down her back. A fly buzzed near her cheek. She didn't blink. They sat in silence for a long time. Elias smoked a hand-rolled cigarette, staring past the dry scrub and dying grass. She didn't ask for one, just sat close enough that he could hear the slow pull of her breath. Eventually, she said, "The man I was with, did you know who he was?" Elias turned his head. Didn't see his face. "He told me he'd come back for me." There was no bitterness in her voice, just quiet. "He was a drifter. Name he gave probably wasn't even his. I followed him too far. He left while I slept. Then the town found me." She looked at her own hands, fingers still raw. "They called it justice. Said I betrayed both sides." Elias said nothing. "I didn't love him," she added, voice low. "I just didn't want to be alone." His throat tightened. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. "You're not alone now," he said, almost a whisper. She turned her head, her eyes shadowed and unreadable. "Aren't I?" He didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what kind of answer she needed. The next morning, Elias left before dawn without a word. Rode his mule down into Broken Mesa. Hitched outside the general store, walked in, bought salt oats flour, and a plain second-hand dress. He tucked it into his saddlebag and ignored the shopkeeper's look. He knew they watched him ride out. He didn't care. Back home, he left the dress folded at the shed's door. She found it later after hauling water. Said nothing. But the next day, she wore it. It was a simple thing. Brown cotton, a bit loose at the waist, but clean. The neckline was high, sleeves short. Her bruises were healing. Her hair looked combed. She no longer looked like a ghost. That night, sitting by the fire, Elias said, "Didn't mean anything by it. Just figured you could use something better than rags." "I know," she replied. She didn't thank him, but she didn't leave his side either. She sat longer than usual, closer. Then she asked, "Did you lose someone in the war?" His chest stiffened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "3 brothers. Zeke didn't come home. Clay shot himself not long after. Roy drank himself to death in a ditch 5 years later." He looked up. "And a woman." She nodded like she'd already guessed. "Your wife would have been. Loretta Jane Hollis. She married someone else while I was gone." Rhea lowered her voice. "She thought you were dead. Didn't wait long enough to find out." They sat in the dark after that, no fire burning. Just stars hanging heavy above them, and the wind stirring out of the west. She didn't speak again. But the way she leaned her shoulder lightly against his sleeve and didn't move away said more than words ever could. Something had shifted between them. No promises, no explanations, just staying. And for now, that was more than either of them had dared hope for. A week drifted by, under the same merciless sun pressing down on the land like a heavy quilt. They'd found a rhythm now. Quiet, wordless, but steady. Rhea Blackbird took on the morning chores without a single word of prompting. She gathered eggs from the last 2 hens, still laying, cleared the shed-hauled water from the barrel, and stitched patches into his worn shirts without ever being asked. Elias Whitaker kept to the fences, checked the bone-dry irrigation trench, and chopped firewood. Every night, a neat stack waited by her shed door. They never spoke of the work. It just fit. And in that silence, something began to shift. Rhea didn't shy away anymore. She moved close when they worked, gave small nods or a quiet when he passed her tools. Sometimes they ate side by side on the porch steps. He noticed the way she watched his hands, scarred and sun-creased, but gentler now when they moved near her. And Elias, well, he watched her too. No shame in it. No lust either. Just something else. The way she wiped sweat from her brow with her forearm. The way she stepped barefoot through brittle grass like it was her birthright. Her new dress hung looser than the tattered one before, but still caught at her hips when she bent. Every evening her hair fell loose, combed through with fingers, and swept over one shoulder. And when she laughed, rare brief, it caught him off guard. One evening, while they shelled beans on the porch table, she spoke low. "I used to live near the Salt River. My father raised goats." Elias nodded slow. "Still got family there?" "They were moved," she said. "San Carlos. I ran before they got the rest." He didn't ask why. She didn't explain. Instead, she looked at him for a long beat. "You lose your land?" she asked. "Kept a piece," he said. "Sold the rest when the cattle died. Drought took what the war didn't. And you stayed?" He nodded. "Didn't see the point in leaving. You don't say much. I say what needs saying." She smirked just a little. "I noticed." Their hands fell still. His were twice the size of hers, dirt ground into every line. Hers were scraped raw at the knuckles, but steady. He couldn't recall the last time he'd shared so much space with another soul, let alone a woman. That night when they rose from the porch and headed toward their separate beds, something passed between them. She didn't turn away first. She looked straight at him. Her dark eyes weren't guarded anymore. "Do you miss her?" she asked. "The woman you almost married?" He glanced down. "Some days, not the way I used to. Because of me, no," he said. "But since you showed up, I don't feel like I'm just waiting on ghosts anymore." She stood still a beat too long, then said goodnight, Elias, and walked back to her shed. The next morning he found her barefoot in the garden plot, bent low, trying to work the earth back to life. Her hair tied back loose, dress tugged tight across her hips. He paused at the edge, hand resting on the shovel. "You think anything'll grow?" he asked. She didn't look back. "Not this year," she said. "But I'll turn the dirt anyway. You know how to farm." She stood wiping hands down her dress. "I know how to survive." Then he asked what he'd been holding back. "Did he hurt you? The man who left?" She looked at him. The silence long and loaded. "No," she said, soft but sure. "But he didn't protect me either." Elias's jaw worked. He gave a slow nod. "You ever shoot?" he asked. She blinked. "Why, just wonderin'." She started toward the shed, then paused. "Yes, I was taught." By him numbered good. That evening he brought out his spare revolver wrapped in a worn cloth. Set it on the porch table. If trouble comes, he said, you'll want to know how to use it. She didn't reach for it, just sat down beside it. "You think they'll come back?" "Someone will," he said. "Maybe not today. But they didn't like me taking you, and they'll like you staying even less." She gave a slow nod, then reached for the gun. Her hands moved like they remembered. Checked the cylinder. Balanced the weight. Elias watched her in silence. She met his gaze. You're gonna teach me again. You don't need teaching. She looked down at the gun again, then set it aside. Then maybe just company. That night she didn't head back to the shed right away. She lingered on the porch. And when she stood, he stood too. Neither stepped back. The wind picked up, bringing the dry scent of sage from the ridge. She moved closer. His hand brushed hers. Then without a word she leaned in, kissed him. Not deep. Not desperate. Just a slow, steady kiss like breath catching in the air. She stepped back. He didn't follow. Just let the moment settle. I don't owe you anything, she whispered. I know, he said. But I'm still here. He nodded. And for the first time in what felt like years, he smiled. Just a little. But enough. The kiss lingered between them, not spoken of, but stitched into every look, every pause, every quiet moment on the porch. Next day, neither mentioned it. They didn't need to. It had happened. And it hadn't been a mistake. Still, they moved careful, not unsure, just respectful of the quiet they'd built. Rhea didn't pull away when they passed each other. When he handed her a tool, her fingers stayed on his longer than they needed to. But each night she still returned to the shed. But now she left the door slightly ajar, just enough that the gentle creak in the breeze sounded like an invitation. Elias Whitaker noticed. Every time. And every time it pulled at something in him. He lingered on the porch longer than necessary, muscles tight, thoughts stirring like dust on a dry trail, choices he hadn't faced in years. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of wanting again, of needing something real. That kind of closeness wasn't just comfort. It came with risk, with pain, with reminders of what he'd already lost. But that night he didn't stay outside. He walked the short path to the shed. Didn't knock. She sat on the bedroll, brushing her hair in the dark. Rhea Blackbird looked up when he entered. Said nothing. Just lowered the comb slow and steady. He stood there a moment too long, then lowered himself beside her, leaving space for the silence to settle like dust. I won't take what you don't give, he said at last. I never offered anything I didn't mean, she replied, shifting closer. The blanket slipped from her shoulder. In the dim lantern light, the curve of her collarbone caught his eye, the neckline of her dress loose again, but she didn't fix it. She wasn't tempting him. She was simply present. Honest. He reached out gently, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut. His fingers were rough weathered. Hers were warm. Their first kiss had been careful. This one wasn't. It unfolded slowly, like breath in still air. He pulled her into his arms, and she climbed into his lap, knees tucked beside his hips. Her arms circled his shoulders. He didn't rush, didn't grip. He just held her like something precious that needed care, not mending. She removed her dress without looking away. One piece at a time, letting it fall. Her skin bore faint bruises, sun-darkened in parts pale where cloth had covered. She didn't hide. He didn't gawk. He touched her like a man who understood pain. And she responded like a woman who hadn't been touched softly in a long, long time. There was no haste, just quiet. Slow movement. Long pauses and shared breath. They lay together on the old blanket, her body folding into his. Every motion was careful, deliberate. When he entered her, there was no gasp, no cry. She just pulled him closer. They didn't say names. They made no promises, but later, her head resting on his chest, her hand gently placed over the old scar beneath his ribs, she whispered, "You're not like them." And he murmured back, "You're not what they said you were." She stayed in his cabin that night, not because he asked, because she wanted to. The next morning, Elias woke before she did. The dawn light stretched lazy across the floor. He looked at her curled beneath his blanket, dark hair fanned over the pillow mouth slightly open in sleep, and knew something had shifted. She wasn't his, but she was with him, and that meant something he wouldn't let go. He dressed, stirred the fire, started coffee. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots. She stirred too slowly, sitting up and clutching the blanket to her chest. "You always up this early?" she mumbled. "Old habits," he said. She scanned the cabin. "You built all this yourself? After the war?" "Took me 2 years." "It's solid," she nodded. "Like you." He looked her way. She offered a small smile. That was something new. Later they worked side by side, fixing the eastern gate. Said little, but moved in sync, like a real team. Until a cloud of dust rose down the trail. Elias spotted it first, 2 riders coming in slow from town. He narrowed his eyes, lifted the rifle from beside the porch, cradled it over his arm. Rhea stood next to him. "You want to go inside?" he asked. "No." The riders approached Silas Kane, the feed store owner, and Deputy Tom Creed. They didn't dismount. "Morning, Whitaker," the deputy called. "Got a minute?" Elias didn't reply right away, just shifted the rifle higher on his arm. "Say what you came to say." Creed's eyes flicked toward Rhea. She didn't budge, arms crossed, dress clinging in the wind. "Town council says you're harboring someone who don't belong." "She belongs here now," Elias said, voice steady. "That ain't your call." "It is on my land." Creed's jaw tightened. "This ain't over. Word's spreading." "Let it spread," Elias said. "You ride up on my land again without cause, I'll see it as a threat." Silas Kane said nothing, just tipped his hat gently toward Rhea. His eyes weren't cruel, just tired. Then both men turned and rode off. Elias watched them go. Rhea stayed quiet. After a beat, he turned to her. "They'll come back. I know." "You scared?" "No." But her clenched jaw, the tremor in her hands, said otherwise. He took her hand and stayed near. "Whatever comes." She gave one nod. "I will." And as they walked back to the cabin, neither looked behind. They'd stepped into something real, and whatever was coming, they'd face it side by side. To outsiders, it wouldn't look like mercy. It would look like rebellion. Elias sat back on the porch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the trail, the rifle across his lap. He hadn't gripped it with purpose in years, but now the weight of it felt necessary, unavoidable. Inside, Rhea moved through the cabin. Her steps were tight, precise. She wiped windows, folded blankets, refilled canteens. She was trying to stay useful, trying to keep her nerves at bay. She hadn't asked what they'd do if more came. She didn't need to. The way Elias had stepped between her and Deputy Tom Creed said it all. Later that day, he took Rhea Blackbird out past the southern ridge. The air there was cooler, shaded by the tall cottonwoods that had stood longer than memory. He carried a saddlebag slung over his shoulder, 2 rifles, a box of shells, and a half-used tin of gun oil. Rhea didn't ask where they were headed. She just followed. They reached a dry wash, open, bare, nothing to hide behind. "I want you sharp," Elias said, handing her the lighter rifle. She took it without pause. She checked the bolt, scanned the barrel. He watched as she lifted it, testing its weight in her hands. Her stance was grounded. shoulders square, fingers wrapped steady around the stock. "You sure you remember?" he asked. "I never forgot." He gave her a single nod, then pointed to a row of rusted tin cans he'd balanced on old fence posts. "Go ahead." The first shot sent one spinning into the dust. Another pulled down a second can clean. Elias grunted under his breath, not in surprise, just approval. "Good." She exhaled, lowering the rifle. "They didn't teach me to shoot for fun," she said. "It was survival. Raiders, soldiers, strangers that crept toward campfires at night." He stayed quiet for a beat. "You ever kill someone?" She met his eyes. "Once. Tried to drag me off a wagon near Mescalero. I was 15. He gave a small nod. "You aim careful, always." They practiced till the sun slid behind the ridge. Then they rested in the shade, sharing jerky and a dented tin of water. Sweat clung to their necks, her hair tied back with an old cloth. Strands of his stuck to his jawline. "Did you think about it?" she asked, after a long silence. "Think about what coming to my door that night. You waited before you spoke. I thought about it every night. Why'd you come then?" He looked across the dry valley. "Because I'd rather have you close than keep being scared of needing anyone." She nodded. "I felt that." That night they washed near the well, separate, but not far. She undressed behind the rocks, dipped a cloth in a bucket, wiping sweat and dirt from her skin. He didn't peek. But when she stepped back, a blanket slung loosely around her hair, damp down her neck, he stopped stacking firewood. "You stare a lot," she said. "I try not to. Then why do it?" He set the log aside, walked toward her. "Because you're here, and I didn't think I'd ever want someone again. Not like this." She didn't move. He reached out, cupped her cheek. She leaned in, lids heavy. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was steady, slow. Her arms found his waist. The blanket slipped just enough for him to feel the heat of her against him. He lifted her in silence. Carried her into the cabin. The lantern flickered low. She undressed again, this time without hesitating. Scars traced faint lines down her legs. He ran his fingers over them, soft as breath. This time their lovemaking was different. Slower, fuller. She guided him, whispered his name like a secret. He kissed her shoulder, her collarbone, the side of her neck. He didn't rush. He didn't take. He stayed. She wrapped her legs around him, held him there, until words no longer made sense. Later her head rested on his chest, legs tangled in the blanket. "If they come again," she asked, "what'll you do?" "I'll stand in front of you, and if they bring guns, I'll shoot first." She was silent a long while. "Then I'm not leaving. Even if it gets bad." He looked at her. "I wouldn't let you." She laid her palm against his chest, over his heartbeat. "I used to think love was just loneliness playing tricks," she whispered. "But now, it feels like staying." He didn't reply. He just pulled her closer. Outside, coyotes howled into the dark. Inside, the fire hissed low in the hearth. They didn't speak again that night, but for once, neither dreamed of what had come before. The week that followed carried a tension in the air, thick, silent, the kind that hangs before a storm. Broken Mesa had gone quiet. Too quiet. No riders. No warnings. But Elias knew quiet never meant peace. It meant something was coming. He kept the rifle within reach during chores, double-checked the revolver by the bed, reinforced the hinges on the cabin door, and added another latch inside. He didn't explain, but Rhea noticed. She moved with sharper eyes now, always glancing at the trail before stepping out to wash or gather wood. They didn't sleep apart anymore. Every night she curled into him in the bed they shared, and the way she held him wasn't out of fear. It was steady, and he didn't hold her like she might break. He held her like she might be taken. One afternoon in the barn, patching a saddle, he asked, "You ever think about going back to your people?" She glanced up from where she hung the wash. "No, not even if things get worse. They don't want me, not after what happened." She wrung out the cloth and hung it tight. They'd have done worse than this town ever did. He didn't answer, just gave a slow nod. But inside the thought burned a quiet anger that the world had tossed her aside so easily. That evening they sat on the porch, her legs folded beneath her, his hand resting on her thigh. She stared out at the hills, a faraway look in her eyes. "Ever thought about having kids?" Rhea asked softly. Elias didn't answer right away. "I used to," he said after a moment. "Back after the war, I figured I wouldn't be around long enough to raise one. Years passed, and that want, it just faded." She looked at him quietly. "Would you still want one with me?" He turned to her, meeting her eyes. "You asking me to say yes to that, now I'm asking if the thought of it scares you." He shook his head. "Not with you." She looked away, but not before he caught the small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. They never brought it up again. But that night when she kissed him, it was different. Slower. Tender. Like something was beginning that might not end. Their bodies came together with a quiet urgency, his hands tracing her back, her waist, her hips like every inch mattered. She clung to him, her breath warm on his neck, whispering nothing at all. Later, wrapped in silence, Rhea turned to him and asked the question that had hung between them for weeks. "If they come again, if they try to take me." What happens? Then Elias rolled to face her. "They won't. You can't promise that." He exhaled. "If they come, I'll make damn sure they know I won't back down. If that means blood, then it means blood." She nodded, slow. "You think I'd let you die for standing with me? I think you'd try. Then maybe I'll strike first." He looked at her sharply. But she didn't smile. She meant it. And in that moment he understood something he hadn't before. She wasn't staying because she had nowhere else. She was staying because she had made her choice. About him. About this land. About the life she'd now defend with everything she had. The next morning, Elias saddled up and rode into Broken Mesa alone. He didn't tell. Rhea didn't want to worry her. There were things he needed to say face to face. He tied off his horse outside the saloon and made for the town hall, where Tom Creed and Silas Kane stood on the steps talking low. When they spotted him, they straightened up. "I ain't here to stir trouble," Elias said calmly, stepping up one stair so they could hear him without a shout. "But I'll say this once. She's on my land now, and she's under my name." Tom narrowed his eyes. "You married her? Doesn't matter if I did or didn't. She's mine to protect." Tom scoffed. "That ain't how the law works. I fought under that flag, bled for it, buried kin for it. And if that flag means anything at all, it's that I don't need permission to guard someone from a goddamn mob." Silas looked away. Tom's jaw tightened. "I know some folks don't like it," Elias said. "Let 'em stew on it. But if they set foot on my land again, they better come ready. I won't warn twice." Neither man spoke. Elias turned, walked back to his horse, and rode slow toward home. When he got there, Rhea was waiting at the gate. "You told them I did. They didn't argue." "Nope." That night they locked the door and shuttered the windows. But fear didn't live there anymore. What remained was something stronger. Acceptance. Grit. She leaned into his chest and whispered, If I had to choose again, I'd still stay. He kissed her hair. Good. 'Cause I'd still open that door. In the hush beneath the roof they now shared, the storm felt farther than ever, but neither forgot the trail that led back to town. They knew what people could do, and they were ready. The first shot came at dawn. Elias was in the barn feeding the mule. Rhea had just stepped outside barefoot, wrapped in one of his shirts, when the crack of a rifle shattered the morning. A round slammed into the barn wall, splinters flying. Elias dropped the feed, grabbed the rifle from its post, and crouched low. Inside, he yelled, not looking back. Rhea didn't hesitate. She ran barefoot across the gravel. The cabin door slammed shut behind her. Elias stayed low, back pressed to the barn wall, eyes sweeping the horizon. Not an ambush yet. Just one rider. Maybe two. He didn't fire. Not yet. Soon the hoofbeats faded down the ridge. Message delivered. Back inside, Rhea already had his second rifle on the table, loading rounds with steady hands. They didn't get close, Elias muttered. They will, she answered, eyes fixed on the bullets. They spent the morning readying for war. Elias fortified the windows, stacked cover around the barn and porch. Rhea gathered water bandages, dry food. She tied her hair back, moved with calm precision. She'd lived through this rhythm before. Maybe not this exact kind, but she knew what it meant when men tried to take what wasn't theirs. Elias checked the rifle's range along the back fence. He could wait days if he had to. He didn't have to wait that long. By late afternoon, 3 riders crested the southern field. No badges, but he knew their faces. Tom Creed. And 2 local ranch hands who never could stomach an Apache woman sharing a white man's roof. Elias stepped out on the porch rifle, slung low. Rhea stood just behind, not hiding. Tom raised a hand, empty. Just here to talk. You did that last time, Elias said. Tom shifted in the saddle. Town's restless. They say you're harboring someone who don't belong. She belongs here. Her name's Rhea Blackbird. You're making this worse for yourself. Elias set the rifle barrel against the porch post. Then go. This ends 2 ways. It already ended, Elias said quietly. She's not leaving. Tom's mouth twitched. One of the riders shifted, hand drifting toward his holster. Elias didn't blink. Try it, he said. I got 6 shots. That's 3 for each of you. Don't think I won't, Elias said coldly. Silence. Then Tom Creed spat into the dirt. This ain't over. They turned. Rode off without a fight. Not today. Rhea dropped into the chair by the table. Her hands trembled just a little. Next time they won't bother talking, she murmured. I know. They'll come with more. I know, she repeated, looking up at him, eyes steady. Then let's be ready. That night they rolled their bedding to the far corner of the cabin. Set rifles loaded and ready by the door and each window. Lit 1 lamp low, then snuffed it out. In the dark, her body pressed close to his under the blanket. We could leave, she whispered. Start over. Go farther west. No, he said. This land's mine, and you're mine. I'm not running from men who never had a claim on anything but their own hate. You'd kill for me, she asked, not testing, just needing to know. He didn't hesitate. I already would have. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't soft, it was real, like a stake driven in the earth. They didn't sleep much. They made love quiet and slow, holding tight like it might be the last time. But neither said goodbye. Because in that space between fear and certainty, they'd chosen something stronger. By morning, they built a second wall behind the cabin, dug shallow trenches near the edge of the clearing, readied water buckets and rags. No speeches, No drama, just quiet resolve. Elias showed her how to brace the shotgun on the windowsill. She already knew. By mid-afternoon, smoke curled in the southern sky. "They're coming," Rhea said. Elias nodded once. No shaking. No wasted words. When they stood at the door, rifles in hand, heart steady, they weren't just defending a cabin. They were defending a choice. Each other. They came at dusk. 5 riders this time. More than before. Dust trailed long behind them on the south trail. Scarves covered their faces. Rifles rested crosswise on saddles. Elias and Rhea stood ready, each at a window, eyes fixed on the stretch of dry land between the porch and the distant ridge. The heat had faded. The sky burned dull red. Elias breathed, steady rifle set to his shoulder. Body still, the kind of still you only earn when you've already faced death and didn't flinch. He glanced across the room. Rhea stood firm. Shotgun braced. Jaw tight. Her braid pulled back behind her shoulder. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. The riders stopped just short of the gate. One dismounted. Tom Creed. He walked to the fence, slow palms out. "You're making a mistake, Whitaker. Ain't too late to hand her over and walk away clean." Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle low but not idle. "She's not going anywhere," he said. "You ride now, you ride with your legs. Stay, and you won't." Tom glanced over his shoulder. The others shifted uneasily in their saddles. "This ain't about her anymore," Tom tried again. "It's about order. The town wants this done." "She's not yours to judge," Elias said louder. "She was never yours." Inside the cabin, Rhea's finger curled tighter around the trigger. She wasn't afraid anymore. What she felt now was steel in her spine. Then one of the riders lifted his rifle. A shot cracked from the porch. Fast. Precise. The bullet nicked the rider's temple. His hat flew off. Not a kill. A warning. Enough. The horses jolted, spooked. The others froze. Elias lifted his rifle again. "I've stood against worse than you," he said, "and buried him farther from home." No one moved. Tom cursed under his breath and swung up into his saddle. "Let him rot on this land." He growled and wheeled his horse. The others followed. And just like that, they were gone. Elias waited until the dust disappeared down the trail. Then he let out a breath. Inside, Rhea lowered the shotgun. Barefoot, she stepped out into the dusk, her gaze locked on the road. "Will they come back?" she asked, her voice low but clear. Elias looked her in the eye. "Maybe." Rhea stepped off the porch, walked right up to him and laced her fingers through his. "Then let him. We'll still be here." That night the fire crackled steady inside the cabin. The tension had lifted, but there was no laughter, only a deep, earned stillness. Elias sat at the table, shirt off, oiling the rifle with practiced hands. Rhea stirred a pot of beans over the fire. Sleeves rolled up her new dress, dust-stained. She didn't seem to care. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked, glancing back at him. He met her gaze. "Reckon I am." "I don't want to just scrape by no more." He nodded. "Then let's make it real." She smiled, small but certain. "Feels like we already did." Later they lay curled up in the quiet way of people who'd stopped running. He kissed her shoulder. She traced the scar along his ribs. "I want to marry you," Elias said plainly. She turned her head toward him. "Is that what this is? It's what I want it to be." She looked at him a long while, then said, "Then we're already wed." He kissed her. No thunder, no speeches, just the solid, steady breath of two people who knew where they stood. A week later, they rode into Broken Mesa together. She walked beside him as they stepped into the little wooden church. They didn't ask. They signed the registry, stood before Reverend Amos Granger. The townfolk watched from the pews, quiet. They didn't need to say anything. The message had been sent the night the riders turned back. After the vows, Elias helped her into the mule cart. "Ever imagine we'd end up here?" he asked. Rhea looked at him and grinned. "Not in 100 years." He laughed under his breath. "Me neither." She leaned close. "That's why it's good." Back at the homestead, the land was still dry, still hushed, still bearing scars. But the cabin had changed. By spring, green pushed up from the soil near the ridge. The little garden she'd planted held water. Life took root. And one soft evening, with her cheek against his chest and her hand resting on her belly, she whispered, "I think I'm carrying a child." Elias didn't answer right away. He kissed her fingers and finally said, "Then we'll raise one that knows what it means to stay." Outside, the prairie wind danced through tall grass. No one ever came looking for her again, because she wasn't alone anymore. And he wasn't silent. They had chosen each other, and they stayed. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.